Welcome to our show, AI Knowledge Hub. A pleasant greetings to everyone. So, I welcome you all to another exciting episode with me, Anisha Sidi from India. And today we have an amazing, intelligent, and insightful guest with us who is going to shower her domain knowledge with us. And we are going to have a beautiful integration with AI. So I welcome Dr. Rose, who is a psychology expert and an aging and ethnic diversity consultant, who has provided us with diverse posts, which is really insightful in LinkedIn. So I welcome you, Rose, to our show. I'm really glad and grateful to have you here. So we'll have a quick self introduction about yourself.
Thank you so much, Anisha. I really appreciate this, and I'm very happy and I'm quite humbled to be participating in these sessions of yours. Like I said, especially that the bar has been set so high with all the other amazing speakers and participants. So it's going to be a tough act to follow for sure. So as you probably had already mentioned, my name is Dr.Rose Joudi, and I have a PhD in psychology. My area mainly was social and human development. I researched refugee immigrants, integration the integration of refugees, I should say, into mainstream societies. And that then branched out to me being really interested in the area of diversity and ethnic diversity of populations and how they settle in new communities. So I coincidentally actually ended up teaching a course called The Psychology of Aging, which addressed clinical and social topics in aging. And that was more than 13 years ago at the university. And the rest is history from there. It just became my area, and I evolved into becoming more immersed and interested in the aging populations and finding ways to, better enhance quality of life and looking at providing resources for them to better their overall aging experience.
Wow, amazing, Rose. I really love the way, how you started with immigrants. That was really it's like a service, no? I really loved that way, and then the experience with psychology, and then you narrow down to aging and ethnic diversity. It's amazing. So we have Michael here. Hi, Michael, and very happy birthday to you. And
happy birthday, Michael. Hi, Ashley.
Yeah, Ashley is here. Hi, Ashley, my dear friend. So, welcome. So, let me start with the aim of our show. It is to bring the awareness about domain knowledge and domain expert to build any system in this world, and to bring awareness about the career where people get obsessed with one career and then they think the life is lost, but we have so much careers to explore. So this show is all about bringing awareness on domain knowledge as well as to bring awareness about various careers. So we have our domain experts to bring us that awareness. I'm just a mediator to just pass or exchange the knowledge. So as the show is concerned, domain expert and domain knowledge. Let me give a quick glance of what is domain expert and what is domain knowledge. For example, if I have to develop a system, any system, especially if it is AI system, like a chat bot, which is for aging people or it is for senior citizens. So I can't just like that make a code, run it like with what is what questions, and I can't run like that. I need someone called a domain expert who is expert in aging and ethnic diversity. They have to sit along with me and tell me like these are the questions you can ask and these are the answers the aged person or senior citizen will provide you. So based on that answer, how am my AI system going to respond? So those responses also will be provided by the domain expert. Only I will just map everything and code it into the AI system. I'm not going to do anything. I'm just doing the coding part. But the domain expert gives us the knowledge, the the expert system is built only by the domain expert. So this show is actually showcasing the experiences of the domain expert. So here the domain expert will be a psychology expert, and the domain knowledge what we're going to gain is all about psychology and its related aspect with aging and ethnic diversity. So our show has five sections, which I call five I's of AI, which is ideate, invest and incorporate, integrate, and then instigate. So first, let us move on to the section one, which is ideate. So each and every person in this world develop ideas, or they generate ideas knowingly or unknowingly, in whatever means. Later on, we tune our ideas in some way with some activities. So Rose, tell us, how did you generate ideas in your career or in your life journey with respect to psychology, with respect to yourself? So tell us your experiences, which will be a great knowledge for us.
Thank you. I'll take some inspiration from Ashley's interview, I guess, or session. I really appreciated how she highlighted the need to be curious. So that curiosity, I think, is very important. For me, I guess also just pulling it back to what you initially said, Anisha, it's really interesting how we look at how we're evolving in terms of technology and advancement, and how quick that is moving, and the fact that we really need to also move quickly with it and be up to date. The recent post that I have posted on LinkedIn talked about some of the skills that we might be looking for in older workers when hiring them. So we do find that people, if put in a situation where they need to use technology, they can use it as long as you highlight the importance of this technology. So the technology provides them with independence. It allows them to be more self-competent. It allows them to live the best life that they can, I guess, despite the circumstances that they're going through. So as somebody who, I wouldn't necessarily call myself an expert, but as somebody who has been studying the psychology of aging from a psychological perspective, we find that being curious about the needs of people, in particular the older people, is very vital for creating any form of plan that you have. And I mentioned this to you before, Anisha. I'm quite curious to see what you come out with in terms of our conversation, because I don't necessarily use AI in my field, but it'd be really interesting to see how we can implement it. And the reason why I don't use AI is because, from my perspective, dealing with people face-to-face, one-on-one is predominantly, from my personal experience, the best way to interact with them. I find that using technology or software can be very limiting, and it could be problematic for people who don't have access to it due to financial, economic, or other reasons. So, and coming back to the ideation, where do I get my ideas? It's like Ashley said, just being curious. What works? What doesn't work? What might work? And being also, I think, very self-aware, being empathetic, and having that love for continuous learning and reevaluating the steps and the processes, and getting feedback from other people, because I'm dealing with people. I don't deal with machines. I would rather not. That is exactly why I'm here in psychology. And so getting feedback from people into understanding what has worked, what isn't working, what can we make better, that is predominantly where one would get their ideas from about this process.
Wow, amazing. So I have mapped this knowledge ideation process with the knowledge base. So you have given us a variety of points, like starting with the curiosity of what Ashley said. It was really amazing. So when I come with what might work and what will work, so we can do some process of quantification there, where we can have like a user interface asking a basic questions to the senior citizens. So it can be with the numbers so that they can respond it faster. So this is a very basic thing for anybody who want to build the system. Like we have to know what might work and what does not work, as you said. It's really important. And being self-aware and empathetic. So when I build an AI system, if I'm a 25-year-old, I can't build a system thinking of my questions and my. I have to be empathetic, thinking of how an old people will think and how they are going to process that information. So being empathetic is really important. So we have to have so many sessions of dealing with them and getting feedbacks, which is really important, and self-evaluating, that is really important. And I know dealing with people is really amazing than with missions, and that was a good point. And so which was a exciting point here is what might work and what doesn't work, and that can be made possible using the quantification process of making it a scaling process from 0 to 5 or 0 to 10. It's like a user interface. Amazing. So let's have a quick glance at the comment sections. So we have Carla here. Hello, everyone. Yes, hello. We had a conversation today. It was really nice with Carla. And she says, curiosity indeed hardwired into our brains from early brain development and helping to ensure lifetime learning. Yes. So
Absolutely.
correct. So Ashley here really appreciate the focus on continual growth and iteration, being curious and determining how the findings align with your knowledge and then adapting. Wow, great insight,
Absolutely.
Ashley. Yes.
That's a really good point. And if I just can add on to that, actually, I
Yes.
mean, in psychology, it's not like in psychology we don't incorporate, I guess, AI or software or any form of machinery. I think for me in particular, specifically, as someone who works within the area of aging, we really have to be very mindful of some of the limitations sometimes. And the matter of fact is, in my opinion, when it comes to working with people on various personal and sensitive topics, they don't want a bot that comes out and asks some particular questions. They would rather deal with real people in the moment. And I guess I think about, when I thought about AI, Anisha, I thought about a topic that I would discuss in human development course of mine, which is metacognition. And so we do talk about metacognition in terms of it well, this is how I define it for my second year students. Metacognition literally means above cognition. And so you're going beyond cognition. So it's also a way of looking at it by saying metacognition is thinking about your thinking process. So you're thinking about how you're thinking, literally, being aware of the steps of your thinking process, which are, you're planning, you're monitoring, you're assessing the information that you have. And when I was thinking about AI and how one might incorporate it, I guess, in our field, it's finding that kind of, that middle ground, or being able to combine the knowledge that we have about what works for people and continuously assessing that, but also about how they think, that mapping out that planning process and seeing if AI might be beneficial, I guess, in that situation. Because I think, again, and I'm probably jumping the gun here because I know there's a lot of conversation about this. If I were to use AI, I would want to think about what value is this adding to my field or to my area. I'm not going to just use it for the fanciness to say that I'm using AI. I'm going to have to really seriously think about what value am I, not just necessarily me when I say I mean my audience, my clients, my patients. What are they getting out of this?
Correct. Absolutely. So the value behind why we develop this system is really important. Rather than, as you said, for fancy, it cannot help anyone. So it has to add value. The intentions behind developing any systems is really important, especially the technological systems. So I appreciate that point. It's really insightful. And the middle ground, which you told, mapping the thoughts like how you think, excellent. It is it's the apt point. So monitoring and assessing. I think those are the keywords which we have to look upon or explore more. Yes.
Planning, monitoring, and assessing.
Yes. So we have Carla. Curiosity is essential for neuroplasticity and neurogenesis, especially in the elder years. I'm getting
Absolutely.
so much terminologies here. Yes. So So we have Bide here. Thank you so much for your kind mention, my dear friend, and keep doing the great work. Blessing always. Thank you. And Ashley, I agree totally. Iteration is consistent with commensurability of fundamental natural knowledge principle that supports smooth information transferability. And metacognition is still fundamentally dependent upon cognitively correct knowledge postulates. In other words, it is imperative for caretakers to have some literacy in these essentials. So much insights from Carla. Thank you so much, Carla. And so we have to move on to the next section, which is about invest and incorporate. So we have that ideation process, like what might work or what might not work, or we might have that ideation process of curiosity. So we develop those ideas, but ideas comes into life when we try to invest something and we try to have an incorporation process. So when we have, like as you said, for any system we have to have a valuable intention. After having a valuable intention, we should have a most valuable and meaningful process to incorporate those ideas which comes into life or reality. Without those process or our investments, our ideas won't come into reality. So tell us about your investments and your incorporation process in your life and your career journey.
Well, I mean, the whole process, I guess, of continuously, for me especially, continuously loving to learn, I think really adds a lot of opportunities for me to be more curious and to be exposed to differences in terms of perspectives and opinions. And I think learning in particular, and this is again a personal opinion of mine, but learning is lifelong, and I think there's always value in learning and continuous learning. There's always a return on that, in my opinion. I mean, yeah, I would say that probably having a PhD makes me biased towards learning, but you don't really have to have the qualifications and the fancy degrees sometimes. You can just do the learning on your own. And I think in terms of investment and also the incorporation component, I find that being able to kind of self-assess your knowledge, self-assess the learning that you're acquiring, and being more, like I said, aware of where it is in terms of the gaps in which you would like to have knowledge about, but you still aren't, quite knowledgeable about. Having that ability to assess or do that self-assessment is very important. And for me, I learn even while I'm teaching my students. So even from my previous academic experiences, now that I'm transitioning out of academia, I find that when you're in a classroom with it could be 50 students and it could be 300 students, there's always the opportunity to learn from someone, to learn from a particular topic that you're addressing, because a student could address or ask a question, or a client might be curious about something that you may have never had the opportunity to probably think about in that particular way. And so for me, this investment comes from that loving to continuously learn, doing whatever it takes to remain inspired. And for me, it's not only being inspired to share my knowledge in the best way possible, but also it's to have a bigger social impact, to meet the goals that I had put for myself. And so I think the important thing, however, is that to know that it's not just about the learning and the knowledge. It's about what are you going to do with that knowledge, and what's the action component there. So it's not just learning; it's doing something with that learning. And for me, it's sharing that information that I have about the importance of enhancing quality of life for older people, and what it is that could provide quality of life for individuals who are over the age of 65, let's say. Or how can we make our society a society that's more supportive of the aging process? How can we address ageism and discrimination against older people? How can we combat our fear of growing old? And all of that comes with education, but not just education, it's also having some form of an action plan with it as well. And I think another thing that I find helps with incorporating, I guess, that learning and knowledge is also being able to listen. And it's not listening to answer, it's listening while you're fine-tuning your skills, being able to think about the words that are being said, or focusing on the important things that relate to this particular field or area that you're invested in. And I think being able to listen is a skill that is underappreciated sometimes, but is super important because it's a form of discipline. And then you can use that listening skill that you have acquired and fine-tuned into being able to think about things outside of that box that you haven't been able to address, I guess, if it wasn't for someone new talking about it.
Excellent. So let me separate this into, as humans we can learn from these points, like we should have like lifelong learning, and we should have a quick knowledge acquisition, and we should have like a social impact mind and to meet goals, and we should have an action component which is really essential to meet the goals. And we have to have one of the most important skill, that is listening. And then we should have the fine tuning of skills. So all these are essential as part of any career, and this is really important, Rose. But I wanted to ask you one more question, but before that, let me go into the mission perspective also. So, as mission, how can it listen? So, it can gain audio data. So, audio data plays a key role there, and then it can do a fine tuning, like the tuning of the algorithms, and then it can have the final outcome, that is the action, which is given using the user interface. So, this is how we map her knowledge with the inference engine, which does the debugging process. So you have so many statistic informations which you give through your post and through your profile. So how do you gather those statistical informations, and how do you check the authenticity of those informations? How
Oh,
do
that's
you
a really good. Yeah, that's a really good question, because I always make sure that even when I'm in a kind of an academic setting as well, that I remind my students that you always have to check the source of the source, and maybe go back to that original source and see where this information is coming from. Usually for us, from an academic perspective, and especially when you're sharing that information with students and in the academic environment, we gain our knowledge in terms of statistics and numbers either from government websites. So we look at statistics from the government of Canada, for example, Stats Canada. And I share that information, of course, and I update that information with my students. Sometimes it will be a bit outdated, so it'd be about 2018 or maybe 2016, and we just kind of do a projection and say, that was, it's a few years old, but it's projected to have increased potentially by this much percent, depending on other additional information. But in addition to that, of course, it's the research. So you look at research in terms of surveys, questionnaires,
Mm-hmm.
My main area when I collect data is qualitative. So I'm not really a quantitative researcher, but I do incorporate some form of quantitative um, information if I feel that it highlights a qualitative component that I address in research. So, for example, you probably saw in one of my posts, I mentioned how by 2036, about 9.3 million Canadians, which is about 26% of the population, will be over the age of 65. That information came from Stats Canada. So I shared that with people. And sometimes to get to people, to convince them, you will need to use and you need to back that information up with numbers. It builds a bit bigger and a more clearer picture of the information that you're presenting them with. And then, based on this, this is something that really needs attention, for example. I also pulled out information actually about India, where it's projected that by 2026, you have more than 170 million people over the age of 60. And that is from the United Nations website. So it's all about really, when I'm sharing statistics, Anisha, it's all about the source.
Yes.
I don't rely on Wikipedia, clearly, but it's usually the government websites and agencies, or it's the research that's been done by myself or by other people. So you really have to be mindful of the numbers when you're throwing them around. Yeah, because some people like numbers.
Yes, so that's really a great point when it comes to missions about quantifications. As humans, even we fall for numbers. We like when we have numbers, and when numbers are shooted, we'll just have attention towards it. So we can integrate like forecasting tools to the chatbots, where they can have these survey sites where you said about the government sites, so we can have the links to them. Why I asked for the authenticity of the statistics is it's really essential, because we can't just like that give numbers from unauthenticated or not proper sites. So government sites are really good when we have to do some sort of forecasting. So it really plays a key role. So that sort of integration with the chatbots is really a good one. So let's move on to the next section. Before that, we have so many insights in the comment section. So yeah, Carla, like great point, Dr. Rose. Diversifying new learning themes and topics and finding ways to apply it. And we have listening is a powerful key of success. Haya here, who says listening is a powerful key of success.
I agree, Aya.
And Ashley, so appreciate the recognition of listening as a critical skill, as well as one that can be actively practiced and improved. Yes, listening is really important, and it's one form of showing
Hi,
empathy.
Adam.
Yeah, hi Adam. So we'll move on to the next section, which is about integrate. So we integrate skills consciously or subconsciously from various aspects from the surroundings. So it is really essential for us to do the day-to-day activities or the projects which we are looking forward. So what sort of integration did you do in your career or life journey, and how it has helped you to have the growth in your career and in your life? So what sort of integration did you follow?
I'm not going to say anything fancy, because unfortunately my integration process isn't as fancy. However, I do appreciate the fact that when you think about what you already have and what you already know, and how you can integrate that into perhaps new learning processes, or integrate the old knowledge with the new knowledge, I think that's a really important ability and tool that we have as people, as individuals, as humans with functioning cognitive abilities. And I always mention this thing to my students. I'd say things like, think about the knowledge that you've acquired in intro courses, and now that you've advanced into more advanced classes, advanced specific topics, Think about how you can use that knowledge from the past and integrate it into new current skills. And I think Carla mentioned that it's the beauty of neural plasticity, which is molding and adjusting and reframing the old knowledge that we have and we've acquired with the new knowledge. So it's not necessarily that we erase everything old, as long as it's, things that are practical and beneficial and useful. It's being able to incorporate and integrate the old knowledge with the new knowledge to create a larger knowledge base. So I give examples to my students in a class on human development. I'd use the word honey, and I'd say, think about when you see the word honey, what do you think about? And then you'd see, Anisha, that the word honey would branch out to things like bear, Canada, and then that would go to maple leaf, and that would go to hockey. And so that word bear honey branched out to so many other words or terminologies that are not necessarily associated with honey, but there's this big, complex connection of information that you can definitely build on, you can definitely continuously add into and grow. And I think that's an amazing skill and ability that we have as people, is to incorporate and integrate and tie information that we've acquired. And that's how you become an expert, really. You become an expert because of the wealth of knowledge and the depth of information and knowledge that you've acquired throughout your years.
Excellent. I like the way you connected with the word honey, and then it branched out to many words.
It's an interesting exercise to do, to be honest.
Yes. So that was a simple example where you highlighted the very important point, like how interconnection happens. So I like that simplified examples always, and it's awesome to listen to that. And reframing, it's an excellent example of how we learn from our past experiences and then we move on. I have an important question, like, do senior citizens, or they do have any frequent terms used while speaking, or do they have generalized ideas or thoughts while addressing someone, or is it very specialized with each person, or do we have any generalized way of like, do they have a generalized thoughts in words and deeds with aging?
I think the beauty, Anisha, of what I do is I'm always excited about learning how unique each individual is. And so the reality is, and I think that's one of the problems that we are coming across when we're looking at resources and supports provided for older people, is that we usually have this homogeneous, one size fits all, they're all thinking like this, these are all the same needs for all older people. And that's hugely problematic, because if you think about younger students or younger people, people who are in their 20s, even people, any age category, no one is the same, even though they might be of the same chronological age. And so it becomes problematic when you think about people as they're all the same, they're all old, therefore they all need the same thing, because that is absolutely not the case. Each person has their own abilities, they have their uniqueness, they have their own personality, their traits, and first and foremost, of course, they each have been a combination they've developed as a result of their unique genetics, in addition to the unique environment and socio-cultural environment that they've lived in. So even, for example, people in India, they're not the same, even if they're the same age category. So to say that, are there terminologies that older people, what kind of a similar or one terminology or a few terminology that's in, I would say no, there isn't, because each person will have their unique needs. And then, of course, we all know that people come from various socioeconomic and educational backgrounds as well, and a variety and diverse life experiences. And so all of those factors influence the way we speak, the way that we behave, the way that we think, the way that we process thinking. And so it's definitely not a one size fits all. And so I think it's very difficult to say this is going to be something that all people use. However, I would just add that it is important, if you were to create a bot or you were to create a form of an AI software, is to be mindful of the generation these older people come from, because there is something about the generation that they were born in or raised in. We call it in psychology history graded influences. So whatever happened historically for a cohort would impact the way that they develop. Maybe might be some form of similarities, maybe, right? I definitely don't want to say for sure, but for example, when we use memory lists to test the cognitive capabilities of older adults, we try to make sure that we don't use jargon, we don't use terminologies that particular person may have not come across or may not be familiar with. But with that being said, we're not just talking about the generation they come from, we're also talking about historically, where do they come from a cultural perspective, what is their background? Because you might have people who are refugees and immigrants who might not have had access to particular vocabulary and terminologies that our mainstream older people have had access to. And so to assume that everyone has kind of equal access to information is problematic.
That's great. So this is with perspective of healthy older citizens. So if it is like they have some form of neurodegenerative disorders like Alzheimer's or dementia, so how do they they have a specialized forms, or is there some common symptoms or which can be addressed among the older citizens with
That's
respect to
that's a really
neurodegeneration?
interesting question. So dementia is a big umbrella, and under dementia, Alzheimer's is the most I want to say prominent kind of, or the type of dementia that is predominantly diagnosed. But under that, of course, there's Alzheimer's, there's infarct dementia, there's Parkinson disease kind of related dementia, there's HIV related dementia, there's alcohol related dementia. So there's a variety of forms of cognitive challenges, but Alzheimer's is progressive. It is that's why it's a progressive degenerative disease. It is non-reversible. There's still no cure for it. And I tell my students, when you think about the brain right now, for a healthy person who's cognitively functioning, think about it when you're on a plane. When you're on a plane and it's nighttime and you're traveling during the night and you're over a big city, there's all these lights that are lit underneath you. And I said, think about your neurons like those lights. And then I said, you know how the plane goes over a piece of land that doesn't have any light, that is more rural, that is more isolated, and you see patches of light, but a lot of patches of darkness? I said, that's the brain of someone with Alzheimer's disease. It's patches of light, but a lot of patches of darkness, but not necessarily immediately, because this process sometimes it takes a while. Sometimes it takes 5, 10, 15 years of a person living with dementia. But I give them that example because it gives you again kind of a real comparison. The brain, when it's being fired and the neurons are all active, it's all lit. But then when the cognitive degenerative disease, the neural plaques, as we say, protein basically depositing on neurons, dimming the neural activity, that is these patches of darkness that you'll see as well. And the reality is, the symptoms might be the same for some, but there are a lot of also unique differences, Anisha. So some people might experience it in extreme ways, and others might take a while for their personality changes, because your personality changes as you progress in Alzheimer's. Because remember, your neurons that are connected with your ability to your personality and your ability to think and behave and interact and all these things that you were able to do, they start to dim. And so what that does is it could alter the person's personality. And I always tell my students, the person that you knew before the diagnosis or before Alzheimer's impacting them is sometimes completely different by the time that Alzheimer's does affect the whole brain. But the brain is a magnificent organ. There is a research that I use in cognitive psych. It's an article about it's called the Nun study. So NUN, so the Nun study. And it was a study that was done looking at nuns in the United States they all lived in the same place, and they wanted to study their cognitive, other than that, they wanted to study their social, behavioral, but also cognitive development as they grow older. And they found one particular nun, and all these nuns, well, most of them were donating their brains to science after that for an autopsy. And so one of those nuns who lived well beyond, I want to say, her 90s, and maybe she lived to 100 actually, who was still very cognitively sharp, still very active, apparently was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, but after the autopsy was done to her brain. So she didn't portray the usual symptoms and signs and behaviors of a person with Alzheimer's disease. And they didn't find out that she had Alzheimer's until she actually passed away, and they did an autopsy to the brain. So the brain is able to sometimes adjust. And I think, again, just going back to plasticity, to adjust parts of the brain that isn't functioning or isn't functioning as well. There might be parts of the other brain that might pick up on trying to compensate for that. And that's not necessarily all people, but you'll find that sometimes that's what happens. And so, coming back to tests, there are a variety of tests that you can do, but you always want to make sure, Anisha, that these tests are culturally compatible with the client that that's being administered this particular test.
Amazing. So much of information, Rose. I really loved it. The way you simplified with the plain example also was amazing for me always. And
you can tell that when I have students, it's for them, Anisha, it's really helpful for you to sometimes cut off all the big fancy jargon and the scientific stuff. Yes. And you just need to simplify it so they can process it in their own cognitive way. And then what you do is you gradually apply more knowledge to that. Because when you overwhelm them, or when you overwhelm the brain, it sometimes shuts down. And every student is unique, but I really want to make sure that they get it.
Yes, correct. Amazing. So I just wanted to know that about the neurodegenerative, and you gave an amazing case study like the nun study, which is really amazing. And so, as you said, history influences and the cultural backgrounds are really important for assessing. And here, when we create the knowledge acquisition and learning module for the AI system, we have to provide lots of knowledge representation, like which you told about neuroplasticity and neurons, and about the older people. Neurodegenerative disorders and their corresponding symptoms and the unique aspect, all those can be fed with some sort of representation, and it's really good. And I want to highlight the important point that history influences is one of the key point which we can take up for building the mission system, because each person is unique, and we don't have a specialized system for each one. If you have to have a specialized system for each one, we have to sit with each person and then try to generate and then make a system. So for making a generalized system, I think history influences has a key role to play on it, at least at a scale of 70 to 80 percentage of accuracy of a system. So
Well, because
that,
you want to make it relevant too, right? You want to
yes.
make the system that you're using relevant to that generation. And when we're talking about older people or older adults, that is something that I think should be done, because what it also shows, Anisha, is that you're showing respect towards the unique experiences and honoring those experiences that they've gone through.
I love the way how you respect and honor the cultural and their mindset, and where you tell about the points for incorporating into mission. You even make that mission empathetic. Even I feel the mission empathetic when you give those points. So I feel really blessed to have those
Thank
points.
you.
And okay, we have the final section, and before that we have. Carla here, another good point on information processing, that is honey to someone in Africa will have different association, but all humans depend on cognition, which is endemic to everyone and immutable according to knowledge properties. These are never subject. Yes, she brought the different perspectives as you said. Amazing. And loved its study at Rush University with Dr. Bennett and the
Yes,
yes,
the nun
that was
study. Yeah.
amazing. Yeah, not study. It was amazing. So we'll move on to the final section. It is one of my favorite one, which is instigate, because in life we have instigation process where we gain feedbacks. It can be like constructive way or destructive way, or we have like we get some form of instigation. Like we don't get a direct feedbacks, but we get some form of instigation through some process where we try to refine our ideation process and then refine our incorporation process and then bring out new outcomes. So tell us about your instigation process. What helped you to move on and what helped you to refine your ideation process? So tell
I
us
think,
about
yeah, when you and I had a chat about this and you were talking to me about instigation, um, for me, what that meant is reevaluating and reassessing
this.
and going through that process all over again. And I think how I would do it, at least in my field, Anisha, is to always be relevant. And so I'll give you an example, let's say, of textbooks. So when we use textbooks, for example, in a course or a classroom setting, we try and use a textbook that is current, that is relevant. And so what I do use, and please do forgive me if anyone who's listening from the States, is that for my courses, because I'm in Canada, I use Canadian textbooks. I don't use non-Canadian textbooks, because that's how you show relevancy. So the students are Canadian students, we're in Canada, the context is Canadian. If you're using information from the outside or outside of Canada, you can try sometimes to incorporate it to do maybe comparisons, maybe see what's been working in different countries or different contexts, and whether or not we can implement that here. Will it work here? Why wouldn't it work here? And the same goes for information that that I use in a classroom setting or even in a workshop setting. I think about who is my target audience?
Yes.
What are my clients' needs? Again, what are their backgrounds and their experiences, their lived experiences, and what would be relevant to them? So if they are Canadian, for example, I would want to ensure that my information about aging within the Canadian context is always up to date and relevant. And so I continuously update the textbooks or update the literature that I read, for example. You could still go back to some older versions of knowledge because they provide you with that main base of information, but you always want to be relevant. You always want to be up to date. So in a course that I would teach about aging, for example, since the pandemic happened in March 2020, I took the initiative to actually talk about aging in the time of COVID-19. There's no textbook that had that, of course, because it's something relatively new. But in my mind, I thought, how can I make this information and this knowledge that I would want my students to acquire more relevant to them. And the way that I would do that is to pay attention to what's happening around us. What are the updates? What are the new technologies? What is the new statistics that have been shared? And so that, for me, that's why I said instigate means reevaluate, reassess, update, reintroduce. It could be information, it could be theories, and knowing that there's never a point where you say, okay, I know it all now. There's no need for me to reassess anymore. I think that's relatively impossible because, as you probably know, especially with technology, it is moving fast. It's moving forward. There's always something new. And for older people, for example, and especially the current older adult population here in Canada, they're what we call the baby boomers, who were born in the 50s, late 50s, 60s. They're actually far more technologically advanced because they have used computers, they have used cell phones. And so what we do to enhance their successful aging and aging in their own home and supporting their independence and competency is that we create what we call kind of almost that software implemented environments or geotechnology, smart homes, for example. And so we find ways to include technology and new ways, I guess, of technological advancement to encourage their independence. So it could be a thermostat, for example, that can dictate automatically, or the drop of pressure in the house, or the heat in the house, and how could we make it a comfortable heat, or it could, or you could set the bath water temperature, for example, to a particular temperature where it won't scald or burn the older person who's using it. So things like that could be definitely incorporated to enhance the independence and competency of older people. But at the end of the day, technology will never replace person-to-person communication and contact when it comes to meeting their needs.
Yes. Excellent. So I love the point of relevance. It's very important. So, for example, if I'm developing a system with the data of Parkinson from US, and I'm testing it with Indian people, does it make some sense? No, because it is indigenous to US citizens and US people who is having Parkinson. I have developed a system for them. I cannot test it with Indian people. It does not make any relevance there. So relevance with the target audience, which you mentioned, is really, really important, and we have to pay attention to that. And I love the way how you mapped instigate to reevaluate and reproduce. We are not like this is enough. This is enough for the knowledge base. It's enough. It is complete now. No, we have so many versions, like version 1, version 2. We try to update each and every versions with newer theories, and we try to enhance the older one, what went wrong in the older one. So that part of what you told about reproduce and reevaluate is really a key point of evaluation at the instigation stage. And I love that case study which you told about baby boomers, which they have really dealt with technology. But then, as you said, technology does not replace humans. They can aid humans, as like they can aid in a way where automation can help, like a mundane task. Like we do it repeatedly. Like you send questionnaire to everyone and you analyze it. That task can be done by an AI system. So it's making it easier for you. But the one-on-one conversation is always amazing because that can't be replaced. Human to human conversation is always important. And the way you highlighted that one is really amazing. You didn't have any bias towards technology or any bias towards the human aspects. You were neutral in telling about the both pros and the cons. So I like that point of mapping. So yeah, we are end of all the sections. It was amazing. I really loved the case studies which you gave, and
Okay.
about the honey aspects and the plain examples. It was really exciting to listen to that. The case study was really important to explore because it forms a real knowledge base. So that was a fascinating one. And we'll move on to the question and answer section. That is a generalized one where we ask every guest, and the answers will be provided by all the guests. And I thought of having a group discussion in any one of the episodes, maybe in future. So these are the questions which have been asked by I mean, which have been collected from my family members because they are not familiar with AI. So I wanted to get questions from people who are not familiar with AI. So they were accessible for me, so I took from them. So I'll start with the first question. What aspect of human intelligence fascinates you?
Well, I studied psychology, and so psychology is really the study of the way that we think, the way that we feel, and the way that we behave. And so for me, cognition, the thinking, like I said, the thinking for me is very fascinating because the way that we think can sometimes impact and influence how we feel, and in turn, that influences how we behave. So for me, human intelligence, I mean, people, humans, possess a wide variety of abilities to learn, to understand, to apply knowledge, to think logically, to reason, to solve problems, to be innovative. I mean, in essence, really, the mind is able and capable of doing so many interesting things. I'll just give you a kind of fun fact that I would use with my students. I said that I think there's about more than 2.5 million gigabytes of storage. And you want to, check that though. But I think there's about 2.5 million gigabytes of storage space in the brain. And so when you think about the iPhone,
Yeah.
it's amazing, right? So the brain has this amazing ability to continuously grow. And I just wanted to add one thing, Anisha. You never stop being able to learn as long as you're cognitively healthy. So your ability to acquire knowledge continues throughout your human lifespan. Again, as long as you're cognitively able to. So older people, regardless of their age, their 60s, their 70s, their 80s, their 90s, that's the beauty of the plasticity of the brain. It learns and it can unlearn. It's able to connect information, like I said, from the past and make sense of it with the new current information. And so you can learn a new language in your 70s or your 80s. You can learn and acquire new skills and whatever it is that you want to pick up on, no matter what age you are. You just have to tweak the ways that you approach teaching and learning for older people because it's going to be unique to their needs. So that's what fascinates me about human intelligence.
Wow. Neat and clear explanation with contact. Yeah. Thank you. And which part of human intelligence should be or should not be incorporated into the artificial intelligence system?
That's a really interesting question. I don't know if I really know the answer, but I think when I think about AI, I think about something that possesses a human attribute. And I don't want to perhaps believe that we can replace a human with an intelligence, an artificial intelligence of some sort that that would do the things that a human or human intelligence capable would do. I remember a quote by Gandhi that said, "The world has enough for everyone's needs, but not everyone's greed." Which basically means that when you look at AI, you want to ensure that what it's doing is it's serving people, it's serving human needs. It's not serving any other needs that are, underneath that in terms of greed and I don't know, status of some sort, for example. So again, that would be my answer.
Yeah.
An
That's
answer that's probably quite vague as well, but
no, it's a healthy answer. Like, we have to channelize whatever we our intentions. We have to have a good intentions to develop a system. If you don't channelize our intention properly, then it will lead into a destruction. And obviously, when we have greed, and then I develop a system out of it, obviously this system will do something greedy, and it will destruct the humanity or anything of that sort. So that was a good point. So the third question is, if you have a chance to choose an AI robot model to be a part of your life or work life, which work would you use it for?
I think in general, again, I'm not against robots or AI or advancement of technology, clearly, because it's actually being used in psychology in terms of psychotherapy, mental health, etc. But like I said, I think if you are creating something, you have to think about what value is it adding, and who is it benefiting. So I would say anything that simplifies a complex process, I would like to be part of that. I'd like to have that incorporated in my business model or my life. Anything that simplifies the process, that when you simplify a process that's tedious or long, or a software or a program or whatever it is that collects data and puts it in neat, tidy folders and helps analyze it, to cut down on time that I would spend having to do that, so I can then focus on my clients, so I can then focus on the people who matter the most. So if it simplifies, if it enhances the experiences of people, that is the kind of model that I would probably use.
Yeah, concise and to the point answer. Yes. So we'll dive into the comment section as we have. I have enjoyed this conversation, and thank you for all these insights. I work with the elderly and specialize in the integration of abilities. I have been working and experimenting with demystifying telomeres and really relating how they work and are visualized in comparison with repeat signs of music staff. I work as an inclusion specialist, providing music therapy in this way, helping them learn new skills on a regular basis in music theory, as to not have repeatable experiences would slow the aging process. Creating music that never ends. You have provided so much validation in my work in this talk. With your points on listening and seeking out the source of information. Thank you. And thank you, Anisha, for this. Yeah, thank you. So, thanks, Anisha and Dr. Rose, for an amazing session. Outstanding episode. And I am here with outstanding episode in session. Thanks, Anisha, for hosting. Dr. Rose, you both are at. Thank you so much for all this love. So, the fourth question is, will AI replace humans, and will it lead to unemployments, or will it lead to new employments?
That is a really interesting one. So when you look at how we take full advantage of this idea of incorporating and involving AI into our business models or our practices, etc., like I said, it could be very beneficial, it could be very useful, it could cut time that you can then direct that energy and that time somewhere else. But with that being said, I do believe that there will be areas in which relying on AI will in fact create, I guess, a way for us to maybe rethink knowledge, or rethink the skills and the training that some people have, which means that There might be opportunities for unemployment for sure, but then there'll also be opportunities, I think, for growth as well. I was reading an article that talked about this, and they surveyed about 150 experts in AI, and about 60% of them actually stated that their old job description has been rapidly obsolete and has changed as a result of them, AI specialists, incorporating AI in their work environment. And about 70% of them said that they needed to be reskilled, upskilled, retrained due to these changes, I guess, that have been brought upon from incorporating AI in their work. And so it seems like there's going to be a cause of disruption in the workforce, but it really depends on how we evolve and whether or not we also will then need skilled people and therefore have better opportunities. So I think we have to be prepared for the possibilities.
Excellent. I love the statistics part which you try to incorporate in this, and that was amazing. You added value, more value to that question. So, is it good or is it mandatory for a business to have AI as a which would be the strategy for them in the business?
Like I said, Anisha, I think if you're using AI the way that where it adds value and it enhances the experiences of your client, I think it might be very beneficial, and it is very beneficial. If you look at examples in psychology, we find it's being used in psychotherapy, where we're seeing it's being implemented as a form of e-therapy. It's being used in assessments where AI now assesses, for example, heart rate and temperature, body temperature, that might help with identifying, for example, whether or not a particular question that was asked in the session had caused that physical change. And also there's AI that's being implemented in picking up on non-verbal cues as well, and how all of that, if you incorporate it, helps uncover some aspects that could enhance the therapy experience of your client. And like I said, it could also free up some professional time where that professional therapist might be able to focus that energy of theirs on other aspects that are very important to enhancing their client's mental health and well-being.
Yes, insightful answer. I love this answer where you brought about multimodal data, like you said about the verbal cues, where gestures are identified, and then you told about the physiological signals and also about the heart rate and the temperature. All these are very good data where we have a good predictions in the AI systems, and I love that applications which you told. Amazing answer.
Yes.
So, can AI be a friend or enemy?
I wouldn't give AI any form of human attribute. I wouldn't say AI can be my friend, nor can it be my enemy, as long as and I'd like to probably reframe that. If you're using, like I said, and like you also mentioned before, AI in ways that adds value, and it could be and it can help enhance whatever it is that you're hoping to enhance, whether it's the social impact, whether it's economic growth, for example, whether it's cutting time on the data and the other stuff, the I don't want to call it fluff, but the other complex bits that they would be able to do or it will be able to do, and then you can focus on something else. It could be a good thing, but for me, I want to I want to keep this discussion going on in terms of thinking about how do we prevent AI from being biased? How do we prevent AI from being unethical? How do we prevent AI from crossing that privacy line? By it having quite a lot of data that is private and confidential. And where is it being used? If it's being put in the hands of or being misused by individuals, then it definitely is not going to be a friend. And I think when I look at the AI that's being used in therapy, for example, I think one of the main ethical concerns that we have is that AI might subtly influence decision making of people. It might, and I say quote unquote, trick people, vulnerable people, into believing that this AI bot truly understands them, and thereby perhaps influencing them and influencing their decision making. And that's problematic, in my opinion. So again, I wouldn't say friend or enemy. I would just say, if it's done right, it could be very beneficial, and if not, then it can be quite problematic.
Yes, right. So it has to be done right, as you said, and it can be done right only when we try to incorporate security protocols or cryptographic techniques to these systems, where we try to preserve or save the very confidential data, like the patient data, their signal data, or so many data like that. It is possible only if you try to integrate security protocols to the system, and it's in the hands of the developer, where they have to be ethical and in developing the system. It's all about how the developer is developing the system. It's like how we teach our children how to be ethical, how to be moral. The same way, we have to develop our AI system in an ethical way. We have to try to code it properly. We have to try it to teach it properly. So teach it in the way of coding. Yes. So yeah. Thanks for that answer, Rose. And so, do you think AI can bring equity and usability and feasibility without any economic status problems and diversity problems?
Um, I would hope that if AI is implemented and used, that it keeps them. I guess it allows people of diverse backgrounds and economic abilities and accessibilities to be able to gain value from those kind of intelligence or software. I mean, at the end of the day, Anisha, we do realize that AI can be very beneficial. It can provide, or I don't want to say provide, but maybe improve diagnoses. It can optimize. It can educate. It can personalize learning. Now, whether or not all people will have access to this is another issue, because I mean, if you think about it right now, we assume that everyone now has a phone, we assume everyone has a laptop, we assume everyone has access to Wi-Fi, but that's not a true or right assumption, because I would have students, for example, who don't have a laptop and would be attending class through their cell phone, or they don't have Wi-Fi at home, and so they'd have to go to a coffee shop to access that Wi-Fi. So the reality is, not all people have equal access to resources and supports. And so could AI bring that? It is a good question. It would really depend on the potential. It would depend on the, I guess, the type of funding, and so it'd be really interesting to see. It'll be really interesting to see how that's discussed.
Yes, very thoughtful answer to think upon. Yes. So, do you think AI is essential or necessary in this world, in this scenario?
I think it's necessary. I wouldn't say it's essential, in my area at least. It might be essential depending on who's using it and where and how they're using it. So like I said, I don't really use AI because I deal directly with people, and I find that's the best way to respect and listen to and value their experiences. And this is exactly why I use qualitative methods in my research, because I find that these personal experiences are best explored when you show the person that you are personally involved and genuinely interested and empathetic to their experiences. So I'd say it might be essential to those depending on where and how they're using it. It can be very cost effective. It can be, like I said, it can be very time saving. It could allow people who are remote or isolated to access services like e-therapy, for example, rather than them traveling far distances.
Yes.
And so it can be a very useful tool to use in addition to potentially other resources, depending, I think, on the person, the client's preferences.
Thanks for bringing that balanced pros and cons of this answer. Yeah, that was amazing. So, what is a user friendly feature would you like to have in AI, if any system?
Hmm, um, yeah, I would think about perhaps what is AI trying to solve, and um, again, it's really interesting for me to think about this because I don't use AI, but a user-friendly feature would be me thinking about what am I trying to solve? What value am I trying to add? And how can this AI feature help enhance that? So you want to think about what's the value of incorporating AI into your business model, for example, and then from there, I would perhaps think about that specific feature, depending on, of course, what the needs are.
Yeah, good. So, do you think the evolution factor of human intelligence will cease or stop after the incorporation of artificial intelligence?
That question in particular, Anisha, really made me think. And it made me think in a very reflective kind of way because I would say perhaps. And the reason why I think that the evolution of human beings or human intelligence, I don't want to say will stop, but it will slow down. You want to think about, for example, how now we become quite uh, a lot more reliant, I want to say, on our cell phones for saving numbers without really needing to remember them,
Yes.
on calculators on our cell phones without really needing to do that mathematical equation in our head or with a paper and pencil. About how we rely now on our phones and our watches to remind us of important meetings, right? And so what we do find, in fact, is when people rely heavily on technology to do the cognitive tasks that your brain is meant to do because that's what it should be doing, then I think what happens is that those cognitive skills and abilities might start to be rusty as we grow older, right? Now we find that we are far more likely to go, oh, I can't do this calculation, or I can't remember a phone of a friend who you've known for many years because you've relied so heavily on it being saved or easy access to technology. So when we aren't using intellectual capabilities the way that they should be used, the way that they need to be used in order to be continuously cognitively active, and we rely on easier, quicker ways to make cognitive decisions, then we are more likely to be losing our abilities to be in control of our decisions. We are likely to lose our ability to be independent because how often do we leave the house without our cell phone and feel completely lost and in a panic? Or we don't have Wi-Fi when we're traveling, for example, right? We can't look up things. And so you could find that people become so reliant on these things that our ability to even be imaginative and creative is impacted by our heavy reliance on technology. And so there are definite sacrifices that we are making when we are relying, from an intellectual and cognitive perspective, when we're relying on technology. So it might, I want to say, heavily relying on AI might erode any cognitive or some cognitive abilities that we have about thinking for ourselves, about cognitive engagement, and perhaps it might even lead to us losing some survival skills.
Wow, thought-provoking answer. It made me to reflect too. And I would thank my sister for this question because she was the one who asked this question. And since she's a biology student, maybe she got excited if some evolution aspect will cease after the
Absolutely.
incorporation of AI. Maybe I should thank her for this amazing question. It made me to reflect after your answer. Wow, thought-provoking, Rose. Amazing answer. So yeah, we have Ashley here. Fabulous episode. I was glad to hear the quote by Gandhi used. What a perfect application and great reminder of intention that should direct these efforts. Yeah, even I love that Gandhi's quote which you cited. And Carla, when AI follows the properties of authentic intuitive intelligence, then the elements of ethics are automatically incorporated for AI programming. Yes. So the authentic intuitive intelligence is really important, and it forms the basic elements of ethics, and that's how we incorporate into AI programming. Yes. So yes, genuine human contact is the primary element for healthy cognitive processing. It's an add-on to your point of one-on-one conversation. So this was really an amazing session, Rose. I really enjoyed it. The way you brought, I knew from the drafting sessions, I was excited that you will bring so many simplified examples for me to understand and for everyone to understand. I love that fun of parts, as well as we had so many thought-provoking aspects to reflect on. As a developer, I was thinking of so much reflections from you, especially the last questions made me to think. Yes, it is true. Like technology has made us to have some erosion in our aspects of human brain, and yes, it's correct. So it made me to reflect on that, and the case studies which you brought about the nuns and about one more case study on one more aspect you brought a case study, right?
I
Just
think it was just the nun study, but it was the other
yeah.
examples, I think,
Yeah,
yeah.
baby boomers. Yeah, they are the case study. Yeah, that
Yes.
would be basic. Yes. So I would say from knowledge base, like idea to knowledge base, we had an important point to address that was metacognition and the middle ground where we have to map the what we think. And so I thought like a question aspect with scaling of numbers would add as an initial assessment, and then in the inference engine which we got from your invest and incorporate, it's about like how do you said about the action component which is really important to meet the goals, and that was really important, and that's how I map it to the mission. Like we should fine tune the mission, and we have to have that action component to start the process, to initiate the process. So that was really amazing. And the third, there we had the integrate part. You said about amazing aspects of reframing from past experiences and the interconnection, where you said about the honey example, which is really nice. And then I asked you about that dementia and about the Parkinson and Alzheimer, and you said about there are common symptoms, but there are specific symptoms also, and historical influences matters, and the cultural backgrounds really matters when we have to develop systems. So that is a key point which we can take as a developer. And then the final one about the instigate is about reevaluate and reproduce. So all these are really important, and all the points which you have told is really important for a person who have to start a career journey. And that was really amazing. I had an insightful session. I'm really
Oh, I'm glad.
fulfilled, and the questions, the answers which you gave was really amazing. I was stunned. Yes.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Rosa. Yeah. So any ending note would you like to tell?
No, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate this experience and this opportunity. And I absolutely admire the work that you do and the really insightful and thought-provoking topics that you address. Like I said, I'm not a high-tech person. In fact, this is a funny tidbit. I started in my first year of university in a computer science Bachelor of Science degree. Anisha, I did one semester of computer science, and I'm going to date myself, but it was Java programming, and I absolutely disliked it because I wanted to speak to a person that would tell me why this program wasn't working, and you were talking to a computer basically. And so I figured that that's probably a sign that I can't deal with things that don't interact and converse and give and take in communication with me. I need to speak to a person, and that's probably what my career should be about. And so I actually went into, I did an intro to psych course the next semester, and I did really well. And so I thought that that's probably the career for me. So I would really just encourage you to keep doing this, because I absolutely appreciate the previous speakers, and how you also simplify really AI. Because when you approached me, I was, I was a bit worried, because I was thinking, well, how could I add value to your sessions? But you do it in such a smooth and natural way, that it just made this whole experience very comfortable and very exciting. So thank you so much for inviting me, and thank you so much to everyone who's also commenting. I really
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Yes, thank you so much, Rose. I don't have, I have so much gratitude for you. Yeah, all the guests, whoever I approach, they accept it with so much abundance in mind, and I'm really grateful for that. The love and support all of them here provides for me and for this show, for our show. I always tell it our show because it's our knowledge exchange here, and it's not like my show or nothing like that. It's our show. We are going to do a knowledge exchange here. So thank you for accepting it and for making it a great one. I loved your insights. I don't have any words to express it.
Absolutely, I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Yes. So thank you everyone, like Ashley, Michael, and Carla, and Aya, and Adam. And yes, did I miss out? Yes, Wire, and everyone there. Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for your insights too. Yes.
I
We'll end
appreciate it.
up
Thanks a lot.